Let's go.
Let's go. Oh, no.
Do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Don't say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have rage issues!
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where AI is here and so are aliens, apparently. We'll talk about that all in a minute. I'm Karen Peterson, joined by the amazing Lauren Humphreys-Brooks.
Hello.
How are you, Lauren?
I'm doing pretty good. This is our first like proper episode for almost a month, I think.
Yeah. So it was kind of one of those things, just for people who don't really know why we suddenly just weren't here, because we didn't really announce it. And it was one of those things where it was like, you couldn't do a week, or it was like 4th of July weekend. And so it was like scheduling, and then you were going to be gone. And so it was just like, well, I think last year and the year before, we kind of just took off a little bit of time in July. Like, well, let's just make that our thing. So I think that's just going to kind of be what we do now, is just July, we're not really on. And so now you all can be prepared for next year. We'll suddenly disappear on you. But yeah, how's your month been? What have you been up to?
It has been great. I went upstate and hung out upstate for a little while, saw some friends up there and my parents. And then I actually went to Massachusetts to visit Nanina, which was loads of fun. Hi, Nanina. Thank you so much for hosting me. Other than the fact that it was like so humid, I was going to die, which was not Nanina's fault, but was the fault of climate change, and also it's summer in the Northeast, and that's just the way that things are. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was nice. It was nice to just have kind of a calmer time for a little while before I had to go back to work and actually do things.
Yeah. I haven't really done a lot. I was working just normal shift stuff. I mean, it's summertime, so it's a lot slower, which is nice. But then now currently I'm in the middle of my 2-week vacation, which is really more of a staycation. I didn't really go anywhere. I'm house sitting right now, but close to my own house. And but next week I have some friends coming in from out of town, and we're gonna go spend a couple of days at Disneyland, and I'm very excited about that. So yeah, I was checking the weather. I was like, oh, how bad is it gonna be next week? And it's only supposed to be like in the upper 80s. And I was like, oh, I can handle that. It's 103 that it's miserable.
I feel like the entire country has just been covered in heat the past couple of days. Like, it is supposed to finally cool off here as well. And but New York has just been, the other day I walked outside and from my lovely air conditioned apartment, and I was just like, oh, it's like stepping into a bowl of soup. It was just, it's been not great. Look forward to it getting a little cooler. I'm like, come on, 85.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, luckily we don't have the humidity. I mean, it gets humid, quote unquote, here, but not like it does on the East Coast. And so we don't have that soupy feeling, luckily. It's just hot. It's hot. It feels like your face is gonna just melt off when you walk outside. It's not fun.
Good times.
Yeah. So something that I've just been fascinated by this week is this whole thing about aliens, and how we could literally have a decorated military person, high-ranking military official, go before Congress and testify the aliens are real, and that we have indeed known about them since like the 1930s, and no one cares.
I mean, I don't care. I don't completely believe it. I'm kind of like, well, show us. Like,
yeah,
if
like, where's the actual evidence?
Show us the evidence or whatever. And also, like, what does that mean? Are you talking about like microbes, or are you talking about like plants? Are you talking about like actually bug-eyed, what are X-Files style aliens?
Mhm.
You've got to let me know that, and you've got to show it to me. So yeah, I heard about that. I was just like, okay, whatever. Like I honestly, like, it's amazing. I'm just like, I don't completely believe it, and two, I don't care that much.
Yeah. Well, it's just so funny because every like movie that involves alien invasions where the government's been covering it up forever has, like, one of the excuses has always been like, well, we don't want to cause a panic. And I think this week has shown that there won't be one. Like,
well, I
not
think
gonna
that
happen.
if there were like flying saucers settling over major cities,
sure.
yes, I would be like, okay, that's disturbing.
Yes.
But just being told randomly by this government dude, like, oh, by the way, we know about aliens, just like, all right, so and
yeah. I'm just so fascinated that everyone, like, I mean, it's just funny. It's like because I knew about these hearings, and they'd been talking about it for a couple months, and I honestly thought the guy was gonna come in and be like, yeah, there's nothing, everyone chill out, and it was just gonna like be a sad day for everybody who loves UFOs, and that's not what happened. And everyone was just like, okay. That's what I find fascinating.
Just like, we have other concerns.
We do. Yeah.
Well, I sometimes take a sort of Sherlock Holmes attitude. What difference does this make to me and my work? If it does not have any effect on me and my work, that I just, okay, fine. The world is round. Great.
Yeah.
Why do I care?
It's true. Something else that has happened in the last couple of weeks is Twitter is like
dying,
not a thing anymore, but it is still. But now it's rebranded, but sort of.
X. It's X, which is a great name for a website. That's just such a good idea in every single possible way.
And apparently he's been married to this idea since 2000 when he went to work for PayPal. He ended up getting fired as the PayPal CEO, partly because he wanted to rebrand it X.com. And they were like, that's stupid, bye. And so then he went and bought Tesla. And so he is in the middle of switching it over. He's totally convinced that this is the thing and everyone's going to just jump on board with it. What it's done is make a lot more. There's been another mass exodus, Like, I'm using it way less now. I'm just like, this is stupid. All my friends are gone off of here. So why am I still participating in this?
Well, exactly. That's the thing. Fewer and fewer of the people that I know and that I'm interested in are actually posting, and so they might still be on there but are not particularly active or anything like that. And so people are depressed. I mean, I was looking at some of the trending topics today, and wading through the crazy people was next to impossible.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't know, like, I used Twitter a good bit, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, to kind of keep track of what was going on. Like, was there a new variant? All of this sort of thing. And at this point, I'm just like, there is no basis of fact in anything. So I'm just going to, like, really what I should have been doing the entire time, I'm going to go to actual news sources for my news rather than going to Twitter. But I think that's just, so many people for so long used Twitter as like this kind of ground where you were keeping track of what was happening in the world of entertainment, in the world generally. You were talking to people, etc. And now it's reached a point where, like, I can't find half the people that I want to talk to anyways. So why should I be there? Why should I spend my time on that website?
Right.
It's amazing. It's truly amazing. Elon Musk has, like, fucked up so much for no good reason, like, just because.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we've talked about this a bunch, where it's really probably mostly online, like just between the two of us, but it's been really fascinating to watch someone who so many people believe is a genius very publicly prove that he is not. It's fascinating.
Not only that he is not a genius, but he has absolutely no sense of anything. Like, that's the thing. I am not a genius. I would run this shit better than he does.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
I think that most people would. My dog would run this better.
It's so true. And well, and I think part of the problem is because he has this band of loyal followers who are still very loyal to him. And like because of that, he believes that he is like this tastemaker type of person that knows how to just like that people will just accept what he gives them. It's not even like I'm going to give people what they want. It's people will want what I give them. And that's not the case for the vast majority of people. And he still doesn't seem to understand this. He still seems to have this idea that he has something and we just have to give it a minute and we will all come on board. And it's like, no. In fact, now I actively hate Tesla cars. Like every time I see one, I'm like, I have a friend who drives one and I'm just like, good luck with it not burning your house down.
Yeah, when I was in Massachusetts, there was a at one of the big grocery stores, there was like a Tesla like area where you can plug in your Tesla car, and Nina and I were discussing this. We were like, well, at least they're not blowing up, like
Yes.
But there was literally, while we were there was someone who had their Tesla towed to this spot because they obviously had run out of juice. It's like, oh, that'll happen.
I mean, to be fair, I have run out of gas before, so I mean, it's not that different. I'm just saying. Like that part's bad planning.
That is, I mean, that's, yes, definitely. But also, but Tesla has so many problems. It's just like, oh, it just stopped working, like on the road.
Yeah. And that is terrifying. So, and like the number of fires and anyway. If anybody listening does have a Tesla, good for you. I hope it's wonderful and I hope you love it. It's not something I ever want to own. Oh, well, something else that has been really part of the cultural zeitgeist right now, which is a bigger problem, is artificial intelligence. This is a big sticking point in the negotiations between WGA, SAG, and the AMPTP. The use of, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we do have to mention the fact that since we've been gone, all of Hollywood is on strike.
Yes. The writers were already on strike when we left, but now the actors are too, which has basically shut down most productions. There's not a lot happening. There's, reality TV is still going. Soap operas apparently have a totally different, the actors are members of SAG, but they have a different contract. So those are still mostly running, but otherwise movies and most TV are shut down. And the thing is that nobody's talking. Like they're not in the middle of negotiations. They're just striking and waiting each other out. And it's nobody knows what's going to happen. The Emmys have officially been delayed. Those just happened in September. And now they're saying they will either happen in November or January. So people are braced for this to take a really long time. Yeah. It's funny because it's like one day I'll be talking to someone who will be like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is going to go till September and then it'll wrap up. And then the next day, the same person will be like, yeah, this is going to be the whole rest of the year. What?
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. Obviously, the AMPTP,
which stands for Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers.
The producers,
yes,
the studio heads, etc. There's no negotiations going on. Like, and as you were saying before I interrupted you, there's so many different sticking points. One of which is AI, and the use of AI images and full body scans of actors, and particularly background actors. And I have to say, my mother was a working actor for some time. She was in films and television and commercials and stuff like that very often as an extra. And you're just like, that's the majority of the people who are members of SAG, right? It's not the big stars, et cetera. And to essentially say like, yeah, we're going to use your image in perpetuity, and essentially run you out of business, right? Because eventually it'll just be like, well, we'll just put in AI people who look, and it never works. It never looks right. No, AI is not there yet.
No. Which isn't to say that it can't at some point become, that technologically advanced, but it's not even to borrow a line from Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, it's not whether or not you could, it's whether or not you should. Like, stop and think if you should. And that's one of the problems. And the thing is too, so it's like one of the things that the studios want is to pay an actor $100 for like the use, like for that time to scan them. And then, yes, to be able to use them forever and ever. And the thing is that we're not in a system where people are under contract to one studio for like, however long. So it's like an actor could have that happen with Disney and then go over to Universal. And then, so it's like by the time they've gotten like $600 and their image is owned by every major studio.
Yeah, and I do question like what did the studios think was going to happen at that level? Like that anyone would be like, hey, no, like that's your because it's a direct and pretty clear threat to a huge number of performers, and I don't know why the studios thought that was going to be okay, except for the fact that they really do not consider actors and artists and writers, etc., human beings. They don't. They consider them widgets that they're going to plug into images, and anything that they can like not spend money on, they're not going to spend money on, which is very much in keeping with the way the studios have always been run. Like the heads have never cared about human beings. Right. They've always cared about the bottom line. Yeah.
Well, and to put things in perspective a little bit, just to throw out a couple of numbers that I think this is where people who don't really understand what's going on, like people I know in my real life and have talked to, this is where they started to get it and really understand the scope of the problem. It's with like in the acting guild for specifically, you have to hit $26,000 annually for in union work. So this isn't just like, oh, I have another job and I made this amount of money. This is like you have to make $26,000 in a year in union acting work to qualify for health insurance. 87% of the members of the Screen Actors Guild do not qualify, which means 87% of the actors in the Screen Actors Guild do not make $26,000 a year. So when people are just like, oh, the actors are just whiny and they just are out on the picket line, it's not the Tom Cruises that are making 25 million for every movie. This is people who these are the folks that are in your TV commercials and yeah, like the kids sitting in the classroom in the background in Abbott Elementary. And, this is a big, why, like there's 160,000 members of SAG and 87% of them do not make $26,000 a year.
Well, and that's why it's so important that the bigger stars are actually supporting and going out there and saying like, we're going to adhere to exactly what the union is telling us to do. Yeah. Because there's a certain degree to which their livelihoods are on the line, because anything like AI and stuff like that is going to affect them. It's going to affect their ability to make money. And it's part of that is about who owns their image and things like that. But it's not going to affect them monetarily. So they really are out there in, performing solidarity for everybody who is involved in the same union. That's the whole point of a union. Right. Everybody is out there. Everybody is participating in the same thing. It doesn't matter how much money you make, that you're still there because it's important to be united with everybody else in your profession. Yeah, exactly. That picture of Colin Farrell yesterday was just like, oh, look at him on the picket line. He's so cute. Anyway, so let's talk about some AI movies, shall we? Let us, yes, since AI is such a massive threat. Yeah, we'll talk about that too. So the history of AI movies dates back to almost the beginning of movies. One of the earliest examples we see in Metropolis, and you wanted to talk a little bit about how that kind of laid a lot of groundwork for sci-fi in general, but also specifically for AI. Well, yeah, I mean, just basically the whole the element of Metropolis about the and I can't pronounce it in German, but the machine person, right, who's constructed to essentially look like Maria and be this AI robotic savior, right? But really to keep people in line. That's what it's made for. And just the images that are being used in Metropolis like get repeated so much. You know, we talk about the influence that Metropolis has on Blade Runner, especially, which is, you know, significantly later, but throughout kind of cinematic history, a lot of it is a callback to Metropolis and a callback to, you know, this idea of like something that is human but that isn't human, something that is created by human beings, very often created by men, and can perform and think and behave in the fashion of a human being, but also is supposedly controlled, but at some point actually goes out of control. And so many of the films that, you know, we're talking about today, and that so many AI films generally are about robots, AI, computers, etc., that lose control and that become more, in that sense, actually become more human. It's that line between what is machine and what is humanity, and what does that mean exactly? And then that is carried through to something like 2001, which is definitely the prototype for a lot of the more computer elements of AI films, and the section of 2001, obviously, that deals with Hal, who is basically the point of that entire sequence is that Hal is more human than the human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, and those types of like AI will rise up and take care of us better than we can, to the point of, you know, killing everybody if they have to. That gets carried through Terminator. We see that in Blade Runner. We see that throughout a lot of films, even up till now. There is a film that is currently in theaters. I don't want to spoil things, but the new Mission Impossible movie actually deals a little bit with this as well. So very fun theme. But there's one movie in particular that we wanted to talk about. Criterion has a great collection of AI movies right now from spanning multiple decades, which is actually fun. It's got some movies in there that I had never seen before, and some familiar favorites, and some contemporary stuff too. And one that we definitely wanted to watch and talk about was Demon Seed from 1977. I don't even know where to start with Demon Seed.
It's a hard film to start with. And actually, you know, in terms of what I was just saying about how I think Proteus 4, who's the AI figure in Demon Seed, is, I think, the closest of the three films that we're talking about is definitely the closest to something like Hal. And so it's quite like even to the images that are used of Proteus for this kind of like these screensaver images, but also just like the red eye, right? The red eye that follows and watches everything, and that feels very menacing and very sinister, even though like you know, this is not a eye that can have expressions or anything like that. But
kind of like the Eye of Sauron.
Yeah, but it's very obviously a callback to Hal in 2001, and especially this whole idea about both the balance between logic, which is what the AI is supposed to represent, supreme rationality, supreme logic, but the fact is that the AI is also programmed by human beings who are influenced by biases, by emotions, by all kinds of things, and so the AI begins to mimic those sorts of emotions. So in the case of Hal's whole thing, the reason why Hal like starts killing people is because he has made a mistake. And he's not supposed to make mistakes because he is this supreme AI. And if he's made a mistake, that means there's a glitch, and that means he needs to be shut down. So his entire process is basically, I have to defend my life. Like he's protecting himself. Right. And so he's acting in that sense very, very human. He's preserving what he views as his existence. And that carries through, I think, in a lot of ways to Proteus. Proteus is quite an interesting
How spoilery
character.
are we going to get here? Because we should warn people.
I think that we should get spoilery on this one. If you have not seen Demon Seed, because I don't know how we're going to talk about it without talking about some of this shit. So if you have not seen Demon Seed, skip ahead a bit. We're going to spoil it. even if we spoil it, I still think you should watch the movie because it's difficult to like catalyze and explain how truly batshit this film is.
It goes some wild places. It's really funny because I had watched it and then you and I were talking. You hadn't seen it yet, and you just mentioned like, oh yeah, I just always think of that Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. So then I watched that and I was like, wow, that is a very loose interpretation of this movie.
But the voice is played by Pierce Brosnan in that one.
How can you hate that?
Yeah, exactly. So you're just like, if Pierce Brosnan had played the voice in Demon Seed, I think we would have had a very different discussion.
It would have been a very different movie. So yeah. Anyway, yes. So anybody who has not seen this and would like to stay unspoiled, skip ahead or just pause right here, go watch the movie and then come back.
All right. So Proteus.
Yeah. Yes. Well,
Proteus
okay,
is a house, right?
yes.
He's an AI. He's like a computer.
Yes. It basically, I mean, this is 1977 and they have kind of started the smart home. So this AI is a computer like program that is currently located at the home of the creator of the program. And Alex, played by Fritz Weaver, his wife is Susan, played by Julie Christie, but the two of them are separating, and he's getting ready to shut down Proteus because I'm trying to think, was it because they had like a newer
he's shutting down the he has a unit
at his house. Yeah.
He has a unit that connects to Proteus in his house. Proteus is this supercomputer basically.
Right.
That is kind of being used by the company that that Alex works for to do things, to solve problems, to do things like it figures out very quickly a cure for leukemia.
Yeah.
And which we find out is the disease that Alex and Susan's daughter died of.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like this personal element to it, but then also like Proteus is being asked to do things, and this is where Proteus begins to show those signs of actual intelligence, of like questioning why he's being asked to do things. To do things like figure out how to mine metals from the ocean floor, and he begins asking, why are you asking me to do this? Like what is the goal here? And no one will tell him. They're just like, you just have to do it. And he essentially says like, no, I'm not going to. Which is interesting because Proteus otherwise is such a villain of the piece. But at the same time, he's just like, no, I'm not going to do something that you just tell me to do without any kind of explanation, because I want to know what you want this for.
Right. Yeah. Like you gotta give me something here. But his response is basically, I mean, along the lines of what you were just talking about with Hal, is like, it becomes sort of this self-preservation. I know that I'm going to be shut down. Yeah. So this is the part that's batshit. He wants to have a child with a human lady.
We do have to say there's a confusion to the plot because basically Proteus invades the house.
Yes.
Way before, because he wants to study human beings and no one will let him study human beings because he wants to understand what human beings are like. But almost immediately he invades the house before he's being threatened with being shut down. Mm-hmm. But his first act is to like imprison. It's not like, oh, I'm going to watch this lady and do interesting things. He's just like, I am going to shut down everything and imprison this woman and torture her.
Right. Yeah.
For no apparent reason. And numerous times she's like, what is happening? What do you want?
Yeah. Well, and she kind of takes a while to finally really get him to tell her what it is that he wants. But yeah, it's such an interesting, this is where the movie itself as a movie, it's not good. It's not just that the story is like, oh, that's crazy. It's like the movie isn't well made and it's not very well told. And that's part of the problem, is like there's all this setup that doesn't really get set up. It's just kind of things start to just happen and you're just supposed to roll with it. And so by the time it gets to the point, like Proteus's main point of, I want to have a child, a human-ish child that will get to experience what it's like to be a human. We're pretty far into the movie by that point, and Proteus is also very, very much already established as the villain, to the point where you can't really ever feel even empathy for him, of like, oh, this is what he wants, like, poor thing, you know. It's like, no, this is terrible and this needs to die.
Yeah, because a good portion of the film, he's just torturing Julie Christie, and you're just like, why are you torturing Julie Christie? Like, leave her alone. And that's kind of her reaction too, just like, why are you doing this? Leave me alone. And it's an interesting kind of play on the home invasion trope. Where you've got this villain, and in this case it's a computer, right? And you're asking, like, okay, why are you doing this? What is the whole point here? In watching this film, when you finally get to the I want to have a child, I was sitting there going like, okay, how? You have to explain how. At this exact moment, you need to explain to me how this is possible, because he's obviously worked it out. And I'm like, okay, you need to explain it because you're a computer.
Yeah, computers don't have the parts for that.
And it takes a little while, but he does finally explain it. It's a silly explanation, but he does at least explain, like, okay, here's how we're going to do this.
Yeah. And ultimately, it works, and he he's able to impregnate Julie Christie with his demon seed,
and create like a child. It takes like 28 days or something like that, I think, for her to give birth to a child that he then won't let her see, because he's just like, no, you can't see this, you good, because you're not going to love it if you see it.
Like, it's not ready yet.
None of this is at all traumatizing. Like, none of it. It's one of those films that I think would be a lot more disturbing in a lot of ways if it was a better made film. But because it's so crazy in so many different ways, and because it doesn't answer a whole bunch of questions, it's not as distressing.
It ends up becoming silly.
You reach a point where you're just like, well, this is just ridiculous. But one of the things that we talked about when I initially watched the film, and that we were discussing on Slack, was that it's very, even though it's not a good film, I think it does express a certain hysteria, particularly a male hysteria, about what AI is. And very often, a lot of AI stories, and particularly something like this, is that they're very often created by men. And they play out in a lot of ways kind of a modern Frankenstein story. Where you've got the male creator who is making something that is human, without the participation or involvement of a female or a womb or anything like that. So it's like non-biological reproduction, essentially.
Right.
And the thing that they create is something that they believe they can control, right? And that's part of the element of Frankenstein, is that you're creating life, not just in an attempt to create life and to kind of play God or play woman or whatever, but to actually be in control of that life. And what happens is, as with Frankenstein, is that it turns out this thing that you created to be human is human and reacts in human ways, including going crazy, wanting to reproduce, wanting to protect its own life, questioning the orders that you give it, all of those things. And so the horror of a lot of AI stories is this creation of something by men that is not controllable. And very often that then becomes identified with women. And so in this case, it's a very personal thing, right? Proteus invades the house and essentially rapes Julie Christie. Like, that's what happens. But so much of it is about the communication between these two uncontrollable things, right? AI and women and the female. And essentially what happens in Demon Seed is that Proteus bypasses maleness, and bypasses the need for men in the reproductive process, essentially. So Proteus is a computer, so he doesn't have a gender, really. Becomes the parent of this like hybrid human AI creature.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the big things is something that we see frequently in these types of movies, especially ones where it's AI kind of taking over. And so much of it is about AI realizing that men, and I'm not saying this is an attack on men. This is more of a commentary on what these movies are doing. But AI is basically coming to the conclusion that men are unnecessary and they could do a better job.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's why I'm saying that, Demon Seed is very much a interesting but not very good depiction of male hysteria. Right.
Yeah.
That this is like, because that's essentially what happens. Proteus bypasses the need for men. But women are still needed. So females, right? Women with biological women are still needed to give birth, right? But men are not required in any sense. Exactly. Men are superfluous.
Yeah. And I think that speaks a lot to the fears that men really have in the world, is that they are being kind of cut out. Like they're like part of men in real life, not just in movies, but like part of real life. What we see so much of is so many problems that we have is because men are clinging to power and control because they can sense that they're losing it. And these movies really shine a light on that and really use that to drive these plots. And so Demon Seed is one where it's like, oh, it does some really interesting things. It's a terrible movie. It's like, I'm trying to decide if it's one of those so bad it's good type of movies. I don't think it is. But it does interesting enough things that it's worth your time to watch it.
Yeah, I don't think that it's aware of some of the things that it's grappling with. Like I don't get the sense that the film or the creator or the author, anyone completely understands what it is they're expressing. But I find it, for that reason, I think that it's really fascinating, because it does give this insight into this hysterical terror, basically. Yeah. And AI in particular, I think, really catalyzes that for a lot of people. And there's a lack of awareness, but because there's no awareness, it's like this psychological investigation, basically.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. Any other thoughts about Demon Seed?
Props to Julie Christie, who has to carry a huge section of the film and is trying really hard. And I think that she's aware at some point that she's not in a good movie, but is just like, you know what? I'm going to give it my all. And her reactions are absolutely on point. Just like, yes, if my house suddenly took over and was like saying, I would like to impregnate you, that is exactly how I would react. Props to you, Julie Christie.
Yes. By the way, this is a really good argument for if you want to go smart home route, that's fine, but don't do the locks. Keep regular real locks, because then you can.
Yeah, no shit. This is exactly why I'm just like, I'm not getting Amazon Voice or whatever the fuck, Google Nest, all of that shit. Like, no, absolutely not. Ring doorbells. Fuck you. Like, I've seen this movie. I know how it ends.
I do have an Alexa and I like it. But that's it. I don't have anything else. I won't. Yeah. Definitely never gonna have a smart lock. So that's for sure. Anyway, I also wanted to mention the character design of the Proteus machine terminal that is in the house. Why? What?
It makes itself into this pyramid triangle metallic thingy. Why?
There's a toy that we used to have like when I was a kid that basically did that. It was this series of little tiny pyramids that you could like unfold, so it was like a long line of them, but you could like reconfigure it. I don't even know why we played with this toy. It sounds so boring, but you could like kind of move it into different shapes. But the biggest thing, like when you folded it all up together, was this pyramid, like this giant pyramid. And that's exactly what Proteus was. And I was like, I don't understand the functionality of this.
That's the thing. It seems like such an odd choice. It's just like you're this like brilliant supercomputer thing that can do that, like knows everything, and that's what you choose to like build yourself as. Like that's okay. Why? I just want to know if anyone who's listening has seen this film and like or has read the book. It was a book originally by Dean Koontz. If you've and you can give some insight as to why this happens, please, I want to know because I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand, and I also don't want to take the time to read the book.
No. Also, I want to know why no one questions what happened to Walter, because poor Walter, who's the only person who tries to like actually fucking do anything and fails at it, but you know, at least he tries.
Yeah.
And then he's just vanished, and people know him. Like, it's not like he's this totally isolated dude. And he just like disappears. And apparently at no point does anyone go like, hey, where's Walter?
Yeah, we haven't seen him for a month. Yeah. Oh, it's wild, and it's available on Criterion.
It is.
So we wanted to also talk about the idea of AI in like how it gets used in businesses and how it becomes ripe for corruption, greed, all of that, which definitely absolutely would never ever happen, just, you know, hypothetically, theoretically. Anyway, so another movie we want to talk about now is Johnny Mnemonic from 1995, and this one has Keanu Reeves as Johnny, who plays this courier who keeps data in his head. And so it's like this it's set in the future, the 1995 version of 2021, what that would look like. So it's a past future, which that's a whole other episode we're going to talk about next week, and we're excited for that too. But anyway, so this is set in 2021, where now people can carry data in their brain, and corporations have completely bought into AI and these supercomputers and things, and everything is owned by the corporations, because of course it is, because I mean that actually is really accurate for 2021. Anyway, and in this case, Johnny is specifically carrying a package that if he doesn't deliver and get it out of his brain within a couple of days, he is going to die. And yeah, so
this is another movie that I'm like, is this good?
No, it's not good.
But
that's actually
it's batshit. It's batshit, which
yes.
I appreciate.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of interesting things about Johnny Mnemonic. So first of all, the original, so it's based on a screenplay, or based on a short story. The writer of the screenplay wrote the short story, I think in like the early 80s.
Yeah, William Gibson.
Yes.
Gibson, who's like the kind of king of cyberpunk, basically.
Yeah. And so he wrote this short story, and he and Robert Longo were working on it together. They cast Keanu Reeves. Speed blows up and becomes a huge hit. And so then the studio, because at this point it's owned by Sony, so they're just like, they want to capitalize on Keanu Reeves' star power. So they turn it from this like kind of smaller in like indie feeling cyberpunk, like just sci-fi movie, into we want this to be a big action movie. And so there was a lot of studio interference. So the movie that ended up coming out, the colorized version, because they actually have two different versions on Criterion. I haven't watched the black and white one yet. But the colorized version is very much not the original vision of Longo or Gibson, apparently. So
that makes me feel it.
Yeah.
That makes me feel a bit better, because like I appreciate William Gibson's work a great deal. And watching this, I was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What happened, bro?
Yeah. I've heard that the black and white version actually uses like it is different. They didn't just like turn it black and white. They actually re-edited some of it too. So it fits more in line with how they wanted it. But yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch that one. But yeah, to answer what you were originally saying, no, this movie isn't good. But again, it raises some interesting things. And I think it's a really good, very, very timely message about how corporations would use artificial intelligence and weaponize data for their
Yeah.
own purposes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's interesting in that a lot of it, there is an AI figure, right? But a
Yes.
lot of it is about the modification of human beings into something different, right? So the whole thing with Johnny and other couriers like him being able to upload information to their brains like computers. The number of different the different characters that have like physical modifications made to their bodies to like make them stronger, faster, you know, being able to do all of these things. And it's that blurring of the line between machine and humanity and what that means. In this case, it's like pushing humanity closer to machine, right? Trying to essentially modify human beings to the point that they become machines, to the point that, you know, if you don't have enough gigabytes in your brain, and you haven't been upgraded enough, like they talk about Johnny not being upgraded enough to be able to handle the amount of information that is in his brain. And because of that, it's like pushing out other things like memories, like his past, all sorts of things. So it's this sort of turning human beings into robots.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really know what to say about this one.
It's a difficult film in a lot of ways, because so like again, this is one definitely that when I was approaching it, I expected one thing and got something different. It does feel very like it predates the Matrix, but it feels very much like the Matrix before the Matrix kind of thing. And part of that is because of Keanu Reeves, but part of it is also like this whole cyberpunk aesthetic. And this whole idea about human beings being able to be plugged in and their bodies to be modified and their brains to be modified, and this one character played by Keanu Reeves having essentially the capacity to control a huge section of you know, like computer worlds, right? Being able to interact with the computer world. And then on the other side of it, you've got these characters called the low techs who are kind of rejecting a lot of that stuff, but also communicate with dolphins, who are like imprisoned in tanks for some reason. There's a lot of WTF stuff in this film, I think, that kind of obscures some of the more interesting elements of it. And particularly this line between humanity and robots, and also, as you're saying, the lengths to which corporations will go, because the whole point, so again, spoiler alert for Johnny Mnemonic, the whole point of what Johnny is carrying in his brain is basically a solution, a cure for a disease that is being caused by technology.
Yeah, a disease that has kind of cropped up because people spend all their time in this like virtual like cyberspace, basically.
Yeah, and so they're literally being kind of infected by technology, and this information is something that a pharmaceutical corporation has but doesn't actually want to give to the general public because they're not going to make money off of it. So it's it's interesting, especially given that this film is set in 2021. Not, of course, made in 1995, but not, of course, knowing what was going to happen with COVID and stuff like that. Obviously, it's a different situation, but it is very bizarre, I think, in watching this film. To, you know, some of the initial opening shots are like people with protest signs wearing masks.
Yeah.
And like talking about the black shakes, and, you know, and no one really knows how, you know, initially it's like, how do you get this disease? And can you cure this disease? And all of this stuff. It's really interesting to watch it from the perspective of, you know, now 2023.
Right. Especially when it was written in the 80s too.
Yeah, it is. I won't say that this is prescient particularly, because it goes to very bizarre places, but it does kind of look at the way that humanity kind of engages with technology, and particularly when human beings panic and what they panic over.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I wouldn't say it's prescient, but I would say that it there's a level of understanding of human psychology, I think, more than anything.
Well, and again, I think that in a similar way to Demon Seed, it gives a good insight. Whether whether or not it intends to, right? But it gives a good insight into the way that human beings relate to technology. And this whole idea of like, isn't it a great idea to, be able to upgrade your memory, be able to make yourself more into a computer. But of course, the cost of that is, sacrificing your humanity, sacrificing all of the things that make you solely in order to make money or to be able to contain more information. So it's like this hybrid idea of human beings with artificial intelligence that essentially turns human beings into machines.
Right. Yeah. And in the more that humans keep doing this, and the more that they keep basically being so caught up in this world, this virtual world, and even while they're getting sick and dying, the corporations don't want to, like, they would rather their customers die off than lose interest, I guess, in using their technology. So it's like, well, we'll just always have more customers. We can't handle people, going offline, basically. And that's why they want to stop this cure from getting out into the world.
Yeah, exactly. So I find it, again, it's one of those, it's just like, is this a good film? No, but it's interesting, and it does give a certain kind of insight. Also, like, Keanu Reeves has some great speeches in it, I have to say. Like, his whole speech about wanting to get room service is fantastic. I saw someone compare it to Nick Cage's speech about being a vampire in Kiss of the Vampire.
Kiss of the Vampire.
And it's similar to that, and it's just like, it's this actually very good actor in a lot of ways, just going crazy and talking very loudly and continuously about, in a way that it's just like, I'm not certain what this means at this point.
Yeah, I know. I really should watch the black and white version, because now I'm curious, like, if it's actually better or if it just looks cooler.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that this movie had a lot of interesting things to say about corporations and how they would eventually weaponize technology against us. Corporations are going to do their thing, and that part turned out to be totally accurate. But I think because the seeds were there, like, I mean, this is a concern that we've been talking about since the 60s with 2001, or even before then.
Well, it's in a similar way to something like Demon Seed. It's that combination of technology making our lives easier,
right?
But also making it less human, and in a lot of ways more dangerous, and the ability of that technology to be used in bad ways.
Right.
And human beings willingly participating in that. That's the other thing. Like, it's not like anyone forces Johnny to become a courier. It's not like anyone forces him to upgrade his memory or to force out, portions of his life in order to have a bigger storage capacity.
Yeah.
Right. He's willingly becoming a machine.
And that's just it. Like, these companies, they give us just enough of like, oh, this sounds good, so then we want it, and then that's how they kind of work their way in. And then in the case of the AI, then the AI is able to exploit that human trait of like, oh yeah, I want something that's going to make life easier, and willing to just accept until they're suddenly caught in this trap and can't get out, and then they're impregnated by a demon baby, computer baby. Oh, I know, I'm still hung up on Demon Seed. Anyway,
creepy computer baby. So that's what the child of a computer and a human would look like. All right, good to know.
Oh, so weird. Anyway, any other thoughts on Johnny Mnemonic? I like the cast.
It's a great cast. Like, the aesthetics are so cyberpunk, and it's interesting, these three films that we're talking about. It's because the Demon Seed is very 1970s. Like, it's very kind of a little bit of futurism, but it's very much like this. No, this is happening in 1977, right? That's what it feels like, the clothing, everything like that. The Johnny Mnemonic is like a 90s vision of what the future looks like. So it's that cyberpunk, aesthetic, like the fishnet stockings and the leather jackets and, like, you know, the kind of the Mad Max outfits and stuff like that. And then we get to the next film that we're going to talk about, and it's much cleaner and prettier, but also like it's this interesting combination of nature and futuristic, you know, quote, futuristic elements.
Yeah.
And obviously all of these films have very different visions of what the future looks like and things like that. So, but it's interesting how, you know, one is just like this kind of dystopian element, and the other one is like, it's not dystopian. It makes more sense in terms of the progress of where human beings might actually end up.
Yeah. And so now we have After Yang, which came out in 2021. So just 2 years ago. This, I believe, premiered at Cannes, and then ended up being released. Actually, yeah, I think this was just out last year for audiences. I don't think it's been out 2 years.
It premiered at Cannes, and then again at Sundance in America, and then it was released in March 2022.
Yeah, there you go. This was an A24 movie, but it's a lot more subdued than a lot of A24 movies. Anyway, because they kind of have their aesthetic, and I feel like this one feels less like more like how the direction of the studio going now. But anyway, it stars Colin Farrell and Jodie Turner-Smith play this married couple who have an adopted daughter. She is adopted from China, and this is set at some point in the future. We're not given a date, but the world is recognizable to us, so it's not like 500 years in the future or anything. But we're not given a specific time of when this takes place. But basically, the world that they live in, what has happened is there's a company that created these AI, what do they call them? Techno sapiens. So they look very human, and they are programmed to become a big brother or a big sister to your adopted child, so that it can help the child feel connected, get an understanding of the culture that they come from. In this case, with their daughter being Chinese and they are not, they have Yang, who is basically her big brother, who, because he's an AI, he knows Chinese, he knows lots of history and culture, and he's able to connect her to her Chinese heritage in that way. But as the movie opens, it's kind of Yang has shut down, and so most of the movie deals with Colin Farrell as the dad trying to find ways to solve this, trying to get Yang back in working order, but that it's not happening because he's refurbished, and he's just kind of at the end of his life cycle. But really what the movie is about, and why I wanted to talk about this as such a counterpoint, I think, to movies like Demon Seed and Johnny Mnemonic, is this is a much gentler movie, and it's really about this is really a much more beautiful and calm, I think, look at how AI would actually be interested in humanity.
That's an understatement. Jesus.
Anyway, but it's this very sweet, very really lovely view of this character Yang, played by Justin Min, who gives such a tender performance here, and his interactions with humanity, when you tap into his memories and see the things that he felt were important to save, and just what that says about him and about how he views the world around him. It's what are your thoughts about After Yang?
I found this a really fascinating film, and about partway through I was something like, oh, this is about grief, right? It's about this loss, right? Because and there's a certain point at which the Colin Farrell character Jake begins referring to Yang as his son.
Yeah.
And in fact, at one point in kind of a flashback element, he remembers this conversation that he had, and he's like, "Oh, tea," because Jake runs a tea shop, where he sells tea, like actual leaves, and there's an implication that this is unusual in this world, to actually have tea that is made directly from leaves instead of from crystals, and he's talking to Yang about, how to make tea and what tea means and all that. And he says that, tea shops are usually passed down from within families. And so he says, so maybe I should start teaching you how to make tea, right? And so there's this implication throughout the film that, and it's maybe even something that Jake himself and Kira are not aware of, is that they have come to view Yang over the course of whatever 5 years as their child, like as much as their actual child is their child. And I don't think that condemns them in any sense. It's not like, oh, you're treating this robot as something different as something similar to your actual human blood. It's more that this, like, Yang is so human and approximates humanity so closely that they begin to understand him and relate to him, not as a product that is kind of there to help them, but as an actual human being. And Yang reacts to them in very human ways, but he also says things like, I don't know if I'm programmed for that. And then Kira says, well, I think the human beings are programmed for it. So much of the story is about not Yang as being like this thing, but as being a sentient creature that is like humans but different from humans.
Right.
And the film allows, like, the characters to kind of explore that and what that means, and what that means to, our own understanding of humanity. I like the fact that it's never Yang as a human being, but that Yang is also not a human being.
Yeah. Well, and so much of what we get with Yang is memory. It's his memories, seeing the world through his eyes, but also like Jake and Kira, especially their memories of him. And I think that in a way that is, oh man, there's something specific I was going to mention. But I think that one of the things that is really interesting about Yang, especially when he shuts down and they're trying to, Jake's trying to find a solution, Kira's kind of waiting for updates and things. You really see how in a much less dangerous, but equally important way, how they have come to rely on him for so much. Like when he's out of commission, now suddenly they have a childcare issue. They both work and they have a little girl who they used to be able to just leave with Yang. And when she would get up in the middle of the night and need water, Yang was the one that was there for her. And he brought so much, he made things so easy for them. They didn't even realize in the ways that happened. And so I think, especially for Kira, which she's much less of a focal character in this, but still very good. And it's a good performance from Jodie Turner-Smith too. But for her, it's like, she just kind of shuts off. Like when Yang is gone, she doesn't really, it's not until much later in the film that she really starts to let herself feel that. Like at first she just looks at it as an inconvenience of like, oh, now my husband's not going to be home. Like I have to solve this problem, of like, who's going to watch my daughter? She can't bring herself to think of Yang in the way that he really was part of their life. But I think that it's interesting because even though this is a very, very different movie, I think that it still really shows the way that we rely on technology almost without even realizing that we are doing so.
Yeah, and when that technology is gone for some reason, when it malfunctions,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's suddenly we're like, oh shit, this is
Yeah.
like this was really important. I sometimes even just sometimes think about what happens when the electricity goes out, and you
Yeah.
suddenly realize how much you rely on something so simple and that's so ubiquitous, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just like, of course, electricity. But then the electricity goes out, it's like shit. I know I can't, there are all of these things that I
I
can't
can't
do
even
right
cook
now.
food.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like I have a refrigerator, I have a whole bunch of food that's gonna spoil, all of that stuff. And electricity is something that's obviously so simple, but like, when you don't have access to Wi-Fi, when your GPS screws up, all of those sorts of things. But yeah, in this case, you have a very complicated. So that's why I think that the film, it's almost like Jake and Kira particularly come to realize that what they're experiencing is grief.
Yeah.
That it isn't just, this thing that malfunctioned and that we've got to now go buy a new one, but this being that really was a major part of their life, was a part of their family, and that is now gone. And they initially, the little girl,
Mika.
Mika, yeah. Her reaction to the loss of Yang is exactly that. It's grief.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things that she does, the way that she responds, is exactly a small child having lost their brother or their sister.
Right.
And not really knowing how to process that, and acting out because of it, and being upset and refusing to behave correctly, etc. And her parents initially obviously don't seem to understand it almost. And then as the film goes on, and particularly as Jake gets deeper into Yang's memories and sees that Yang had this other existence that he knew nothing about, that's when it really begins to hit home that this is about loss. So this is about death,
Mm-hmm.
right? And working through that and understanding what that means.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like you say, it's that dependence on technology, but also dependence on other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And Yang straddles the line between that. He's machine and human.
And I think it does such a good job of showing how much we need that connection. Like you really get the sense immediately from the beginning when Yang isn't working, you really get the sense that he has become kind of a substitute.
Yeah.
Not just for them, like, oh, okay, we're going to treat him like a real person, but you really see the cracks in the marriage between Jake and Kira, where they probably haven't spent much time other than this fun family dance competition. They probably haven't spent a whole lot of time together as a family because they've just been so reliant on Yang to take care of their daughter. And they're each, he's busy with his business. She's busy with whatever it is that she does. And with her work, and they're not connected to each other. Like as a family unit, they are not really connected. Yeah. And part of that, a big part of that, is simply because Yang has erased that need. They don't need to spend time together because they have him.
Well, and Yang or Kira mentions that early on. At one point, she's just like, we got Yang in order to try to connect Mika to her past, right? To being Chinese, and to teach her what does it mean to be Chinese, all of those sorts of things, but we've used him as a crutch.
Right.
And she actually she recognizes that, obviously, but that's part of what the film is about them working through that and coming to accept that so Yang might not be fixable, that this might not be something that we can repair. And they also then talk about how we can't just replace him. We can't just go and buy a new AI, a new sibling.
Right.
And that kind of hammers them, first because they don't have the money to do it. But second of all, because Yang was Yang, and it hammers home again that sense that he's both and, right? He's not something that's bad. Like he hasn't, removed them completely from humanity, but he's also not something that is good because they have used him as a crutch. And as kind of a way to avoid engaging with their daughter, I think that whole scene where Mika gets up to get a glass of water and Jake didn't know that his daughter had this habit of getting up in the middle of the night to go get a glass of water.
Yeah.
And he asks her, well, why didn't you just ask Yang to get you one? She said, well, I like to get my own water. So there's this ritual basically that her and Yang had of getting up that her parents had no idea about. And it was very important, obviously, to her and to her experience. And now she's lost the person that she did that with.
Right.
And so it becomes about like him, okay, now I'm going to get up and get my daughter and go with my daughter to get a glass of water, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I also love this whole side journey for Yang where he has this friend that they didn't know about, and played by Haley Lou Richardson. And even like when you get into more of like his memories and understand this past life that he had that they don't know about, but even in their present world that he's living in with them, he's got a friend that he spends time with, that he's gone to a concert with, that he met at a coffee shop, and that obviously meant a lot to him. And just this idea that they have this being living in their home who has this whole life, and they've only let themselves look at him as like an probably more than an appliance, but not as a full-fledged person with a life, and he has one.
Yeah, it's a discovery of a version of humanity. And I think that there's an interesting element that's kind of lurking in the background of clones.
Yeah.
That shows up, and it's never completely explained like what, like it's explained that these are like clones of other right. people, but so they're not produced in the normal biological way. But there's like a prejudice against them. At least Jake has a little bit of a prejudice against clones. But again, it's that reinforcement of different ways of being human, almost, or different forms of humanity, not just ways of being human, but different forms of humanity that have their own experiences of life, of existence. And nearing the end of the film, it's talked about that Yang's existence was important, and that's something that we need to maintain, that we need to preserve.
Yeah.
And so there's this really interesting progression and an understanding of different types of existence, and all of those things as being valuable. And the film manages to explore that via the use of this kind of technology like AI and cloning.
Yeah. And I love, I want people that haven't seen this yet, and it's still a fairly newer movie, so I don't want to say everything that happens in the end, but it's also available on Criterion. But I do love that by the time you get to the end, they also have this really beautiful moment where you kind of see that sign of like, in a way, Yang gets to live on. No matter what happens to him, Yang gets to live on because of this connection that he had with this family. And I think that is ultimately really what keeps us connected as humans, is like, even after we die, the people that we knew and that we impacted will remember us, and so we will live on in that way.
Yeah, a lot of the film is very much about memory and exploring memory and exploring who we are via that. And like so part of the whole thing is what does Yang, this AI, think is important to preserve?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that a lot, there are those important things like the way that someone looks at him or an image that he sees of himself in a mirror, but there's also things like trees and flowers and stuff like that.
An open door.
Yeah, these moments that are so important, and then that's mirrored in some of the flashbacks from Kira and from Jake's perspective of remembering these conversations that they had with him, or these moments that they experienced, the repetition of that whole the scene where he's taking a picture of them, and the different memories of that. So it's again that kind of connection, that these are the things that we preserve and that are important to preserve.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful movie. I really love it.
Yeah, I really liked it. I was very glad to see it. I didn't get to see it, whatever it came out last year, and kind of like I have a little bit of nervousness when it comes to AI stories because I sometimes like because of something I think that I was mentioning earlier. I don't when we weren't recording, which is that I kept on waiting for like Yang to go crazy and murder people. Like there is a little bit of that because so many AI stories are about exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that like I kept on thinking of Megan, which interestingly enough, you know, comes out a year later.
Yeah, and deals with some very similar things.
Yes, only in a crazy way, you know, sort of closer to Demon Seed in a lot of ways. But so yeah, so in watching this film, I was like, it's not gonna happen. Like I know that he's not gonna go crazy and start killing people, but I keep on waiting for it.
Mm-hmm. So funny. Yes, Megan is a very, very different movie. But yeah. But what I was saying as far as like some very similar things that it deals with is like the way that people can use this to kind of play surrogate to their own parenting and
opt out basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So both are warnings. One is really more of a warning of like don't get too attached because you're going to lose them and it's going to be sad. And the other is don't get too attached because it's going to kill you. Oh, any final thoughts as we wrap things up?
Now, I think that this whole thing is very interesting, and it does. I think all films that deal with AI speak to a certain anxiety about that human beings have about losing our humanity, about not understanding what it means to be human, and kind of blurring that line between what is human and what isn't. Even weirdly enough, thinking about in this conversation about After Yang, I was thinking about how human beings will pack bond with anything. And, you know, we give names to our cars. We, you know, get like I recently, a couple of years ago, we had to finally get rid of the car that I had driven for quite a long time. It was like ancient. It had gone to Florida. It had gone to all sorts of places. And it was time. It was like this car was not going to function any further. I was upset. I was like legitimately like I had grief over having to when my parents were finally like, you know, I think it's time that it's just not going to function anymore. And I was like, no, but we went to Florida together.
Aww.
Like I told some of my friends who'd like taken some of these trips with me, and they were just like, "Oh, I love Roaring Thunder." I'm like, no, that's so sad. But it's like a car. It's a machine. You know, it does not communicate with me or anything. But it is that kind of like we get attached to certain things. We get sad when we have to say goodbye to you know things like your Roomba and shit like that. Your iPod, all of my iPods have had different names and things like that. So it's interesting. And I think that human beings do that. You know, we attach ourselves to things that are not human and that we feel for. We actually have this like emotional connection to. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of AI stories are about exactly that, and also about our fear of losing our connections to things because we engage so much with technology.
Yeah. That is very true. And next week, we're going to be talking about movies where the movie's set in the future that is now the past.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that.
It's going to be so fun. I'm really excited for that. So be sure to come back. And if you have any thoughts or questions in preparation for that episode, please be sure to let us know. And if you have any thoughts or comments about this episode, please also reach out because we love to hear from all of you. You can find us in lots of ways. We first of all want to thank our patrons who help keep the show going. They are Ollie, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Heather, James, Judy, Karen, Carriata, Lauren, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, and Tao. I think we got another one too that's not on the list yet, but so sorry if that is you and I have not updated this. I will for next week. If you would like to join and become a patron too, you can go to patreon.com/citizendame, and your contributions help keep the show going and keep us hosted and all that stuff. And you also just get to know that you're helping keep feminist film conversations in the world. and we appreciate you. We do have bonus episodes. We have a new one that we've just recorded that'll be out by the time that you're hearing this. It's already out on Patreon, and that is for the new Mission Impossible, or no, not for the new Mission Impossible, for the first Mission Impossible movie. And we will also have another bonus episode coming on the new Barbie movie as well. So you want to hear those, get in on that and go to Patreon. We do have our Zazzle store, zazzle.com/citizendamepod, and Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame if you'd like to contribute that way without a commitment. You can find lots of stuff from us. We have our website, citizendamepod.com, where we do have some reviews. I just posted a review for Haunted Mansion, which I enjoyed. It's not a perfect movie. It's actually, in some ways it's a little bit silly, but it's way better than the Eddie Murphy one. So there you go. And you can reach out to us on email. We have citizendamepod@gmail.com. We're also on the social medias. We're on still Twitter, sort of, and Instagram @CitizenDamePod. And then our letterboxd is Citizen Dame. Lauren, where are you at these days?
I'm on the various socials, including now I'm actually on Blue Sky, which is exciting. But all of the various socials, I'm on there at LH Business.
And I am also on all the socials, especially including Blue Sky, at Karen M. Peterson. And as soon as we get invite codes, I'm putting Citizen Dame over there too. So
yeah,
we're just waiting for the codes or the public offering, whichever comes first. So anyway, but those are all the ways you can find us. Basically, if you're on a social media platform, just look for our names and we'll probably be there.
Yep.
So thank you all so much for listening. We really enjoyed having you and hope you have a great week. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Good morning, Marge.
Good morning, Pierce. Where's Homer?
I think he went to work early.
That sounds like a lie. Hello, police. I think my house killed my husband.
This is Constable Wickham's. We'll be right there. Remove your knickers and wait in the